Welcome to Session 3, Advocacy and Public Engagement. What does advocacy at the board level look like? First, let's start off by defining what is advocacy. Advocacy is simply the public support for a particular cause or policy. It's a powerful way to leverage the important mission work that your organization is doing. Nonprofit advocacy is not about partisan politics or political candidates. Advocacy is about educating decision makers and the public about your mission. Why should you advocate? Public policy can play a positive role in making the world a better place, and it can help nonprofits make important advances that create the lasting change that they are working towards. Advocacy is really telling the story of your organization's mission and why you do the work you do. Advocacy can be many different things. It can be asking your community zoning board for permission to have a farmers market in an underserved neighborhood, requesting a parking variance to allow for a meal truck to serve homeless people, arranging a meeting with an elected official and educating them about the value of job training program that uses public funding, partnering with government agencies to use a public building for a youth program, or even convening community leaders at times of natural disaster or human crisis to develop solutions for the community and promote healing. The organization has several different roles in advocacy. The first is to inform and activate the network. Helping inform and activate organizations' network in support of important policy issues is one role for the organization. A board can add value to this role by helping elevate the visibility of these efforts by leveraging board members' personal influence networks and serving as a unified organizational voice. The second role is research the impact of policy issues. Analyzing specific policy issues impact or would impact the community you serve is an essential role for the organization and advocacy. Boards can help by supporting the investment in research during budgeting and planning and helping to identify and connect with donors or funders that may help underwrite research. The third role is to educate policy makers and the public. Educating policymakers, media, and general public about how an issue or piece of legislation is impacting the communities they serve is an important role for an organization in advocacy. Boards can help by leveraging personal networks and influence to reach decision makers and serving as an influential community voice with decision makers. The fourth role organizations play in advocacy is joining forces to create a louder voice. Bringing community leaders together to jointly identify community needs and challenges and build shared priorities for public policy change is an important role that organizations play. Boards can help by identifying and connecting with community leaders and organizations with diverse spheres of influence and help overcoming challenging power dynamics or turf issues. You may think that nonprofits are not allowed to advocate. The truth is, a 501c3 nonprofit organization, you have a legal right to advocate. And when your mission and the people you serve are depending on you, you have a responsibility to do so. But not all advocacy is the same, and there are some important things to know and understand. Legislative lobbying. All types of nonprofits are allowed to educate policymakers, the media, and the public about issues that are important to their mission, as long as it doesn't include information about specific candidates or pieces of legislation. It is this type of advocacy that is the primary focus of nonprofits. Elections and electioneering. Lobbying means working for or against a specific piece of legislation or ballot measure. Most nonprofits are allowed to engage in limited amount of legislative lobbying, which can be a very important way to advance or protect your organization's mission and impact. When there's a big decision being made that will affect your mission, you have a right and a responsibility to weigh in. Educate and inform. Nonprofit organizations may engage in nonpartisan voter registration, education, and turnout activities. However, supporting or opposing a specific candidate or set of candidates or a political party is never allowed for 501c3 organizations. The board has three critical roles in advocacy. The first is strategy. Understand how the policy environment could impact the work of the organization. Build strategies that seize public policy opportunities and address public policy threats. Leverage advocacy as a way to get things done. The second role is budget and resources. Understand your organization's budget and any public funds that may be vulnerable if public policy shifts. Prioritize resources to support strategic engagement and advocacy, um, such as coalition membership or staff time. And finally, personal engagement. Leverage your influence and networks in the support of the organization's advocacy efforts by making calls, setting up meetings, etc. Attend meetings with decision makers and lawmakers together with organization staff, and participate in group advocacy efforts such as lobby days or congressional hearings. Now let's hear from an expert in public advocacy, Mary Ingram. Okay, well, thank you for joining us, Mary. We have Mary Ingham here with the Executive Director of Crisis Intervention Service, and we are going to be talking about advocacy and public engagement at the board level. So, Mary, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with your organization?
Sure. I'm Mary Ingham, the Executive Director of Crisis Intervention Service. As the Executive Director, I'm responsible for primarily everything that goes wrong. And I get to lift up our staff that do everything right. But really my goal is to kind of be that leader to make sure that we are engaging every day in meeting our mission and working towards our vision. I get to do a lot of the grant writing and all of the policy work. So I have the luxury on one level of kind of having that big picture, look to the future, make sure we're moving along our path. But also every day, because we're a small organization, get to see every day kind of that boots on the ground, what we're doing every day to help individuals and families in North Iowa. And I honestly think one of the most important roles of an executive director, and I kind of joked about it initially about taking all of the bad on my shoulders, and I honestly do believe that's my job. If there's something that goes wrong, ultimately it's my responsibility. And I would much rather have someone we're serving or a community member mad at me than one of our advocates that are working tirelessly every day. So I don't have a problem taking the heat. I used to cry a lot alone, but I still cry, so I'm not gonna lie.
It's healthy to cry.
It is. Good, happy tears, sad tears, they're all good.
So, can you tell us what advocacy looks like for your organization?
Sure, and some of what I did to frame this is I used a variety of my own board experiences. My first interaction with a board was when I was hired at Crisis Intervention Service. I was interviewed by the board, which is a super intimidating, scary thing for someone fresh out of college that's going to change the world. It was kind of that group interview style that I think really, yeah, I mean, it was awesome. So that was my first interaction as a staff person working with the board. And it was one of those things where I was almost kind of thrown into the position. So I didn't have a lot, to work with, but we had a great board and we worked together. And I think that's one of the most important things that I learned, that as an executive director, having a board that kind of has your back, that can help take some of the heat off of you, help you with those policy decisions. And for me, one of the most important things is just having someone I can pick up the phone and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Do you think it's an okay thing? And so my first interaction with the board was awesome. And then as I advanced in my career, I joined several boards related to the work that we do. And on top of that, one year I got a little crafty and decided I was going to run for the local school board. And that's a totally different experience. I ran for the school board because I love children and I want every child to be happy and healthy and have a good, healthy lunch at school and all of that stuff. Um, and a lot of being a board member at that level was looking at budgets and looking at numbers and talking about things that I wasn't overly passionate about,
Mm-hmm.
but I ultimately became passionate. So it was a board position that really challenged me, and I could see the good every day that it was doing in our community. And then I've also served on other just local nonprofit boards. For example, the food bank, which is a great feel-good board to be on. I'm also a member of the Swelldale Public Library Board, which is a position most people strive to achieve at some point in their life. Swelldale has one of the nicest libraries in the history of libraries. Everyone should visit it this week.
Oh, well, we will.
Awesome. We need more visitors. And check out a book.
Well, I totally am behind you on libraries. So can you tell us, what is advocacy? Sometimes you hear it and you don't know what that even means.
Sure. And for me, it was a topic that I love because when I started this work, we had many staff positions called advocates. And it's a job title most people, when they hear that, they don't really know what that means.
Mm-hmm.
So in my realm, an advocate or advocacy can be both a noun and a verb. So we have people at our agency that spend their entire day advocating for others. And basically, when I try to define an advocate, here's the definition I give new people. An advocate means to stand with someone, to be a mouthpiece and give voice to those whose voices have been subdued. The action of advocacy is focused on changing what people in power do in ways that promote the interests of those with less power.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about that in our work when we work with victims, but the reality is, as board members in the board world, that's what our board does. There are a lot of times they help us be that public face of the agency. The director is often that first person, but I can only be one or two places at a time. And having a strong board that's able to go out there and help be that face to say, yeah, I'm representing Crisis Intervention Service, and to be that mouthpiece,
Mm-hmm.
to be that voice. The reality is a lot of times when we just look at the nonprofit sector, a lot of times we aren't maybe seen as a legitimate business or having a lot of power in the community, when in fact, I believe that people that can run a nonprofit, if you can balance a huge organization on a tiny little budget, there's great creativity and resources in nonprofits. So, really just being that voice and helping advance causes.
So, what do you wish that board members knew about advocacy?
I think number one, that it's not as scary or as complex as people think. It actually can be fun. It actually should be fun because I believe I can tell when someone is passionate about what they're talking about. I think that passion just really shines through. So make it fun. So if you are, you're a board member and let's say you are trying to promote healthy activities for children and you secretly hate children, that's going to come through and you're not going to be the best advocate. But really, if you're passionate, if you're a nonprofit board member, chances are you are passionate about the board that you are serving on. And, if you can pull a little bit of that passion, the reason why you're giving up an hour every month to go to a board meeting or why you're doing these different things, it really is a powerful voice. For example, when I talk in public or I'm talking to the media, I think when people see my face, they immediately think, oh, that's the girl that's going to talk about domestic violence or sexual assault or homicide. They know that. They know that about me. I do think people care about what I say. I think people respect my knowledge and experience, but I think it is so incredibly powerful when we have a board member that will maybe stand up in front of a group of people and say, I volunteer my time to serve on this board. I serve on this board because my daughter was a victim of domestic violence, or I serve on this board because my mother was murdered by her partner. That captures a room and that gets attention in a very different way. I always feel that in the back of my mind when I'm talking, for example, to elected officials, that again, they know that I know what I'm talking about, but I always fear they're thinking, well, of course you're advocating for this because it's your paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we have a board member that's advocating for a cause or an issue because it's their passion, I think people hear it in a different way.
Awesome. How can advocacy at the board level impact an organization?
I think the first, it really helps just strengthen that message and expand that base. Again, I can only be so many places at a time. Most of our staff are busy all day long doing what they do best, providing those direct services. So one thing it can really help just expand that message. And I think, again, people, I reference talking to elected officials. And I think that's something that sometimes people get a little nervous about, but it's not nearly that bad. But you can start with something super, super easy. You can start by simply, advocacy can be as simple as telling your friends, hey, I volunteer my time here and this is why it's important to me. Would you consider supporting our annual campaign? Or here's an issue that's happening right now. Could you make one call to a senator about this? It could be writing a letter to the editor. It can be as simple as clicking share on your Facebook page. I mean, seriously, that just expands that message. And again, you're just helping amplify other voices. And I think some of that, just getting that initial advocacy work, just getting started and gaining more confidence to build up to that level. And, we talk a lot about talking with elected officials. And I think one of the greatest things about being an Iowan, and sometimes it's a challenge, but we have such incredible access to all elected officials. The reality is every Iowan can shake the hand of the next president because chances are they've been in your living room or your neighbor's living room, and they're, pre-caucus, it's hard to walk down the street without seeing someone running for president. But that's great power. And the reality is, I think everyone that runs for public office wants to help their community. They want to hear from the people in the community. And I have never felt like they didn't care about what I wanted to hear. So, I mean, it's really, when you think about it, it's just like having a conversation. It's just, it's no different than striking up a conversation when you're checking out at Target or Hy-Vee.
How can board members ensure that they're participating in positive advocacy?
I think that is where it really comes in a few things. If board members make this their goal as a board, like this is something we're going to do together, I think one great way to look at this is every board meeting, if people could report back, like who was able to reach out to somebody or how many people shared a post. If that just became a routine part of the meeting agenda, or people shared their information ahead of time, depending on how people structure their meeting, I think board members can really hold each other accountable there. I think for some actions, it could be, one example recently, and maybe it's not totally recently, but when Mason City was advocating to have RAGBRAI go through, the community really rallied around that effort. There was such energy, and that was a success when the RAGBRAI committee said, yes, we're going through Mason City, and we had cool t-shirts and all of that. So sometimes you can evaluate the success or the positive advocacy based on the outcome. Others can hold you accountable, board members. And then this is also where if you have a good relationship with your director can also give some feedback like, hey, I need more people to help me with this, or could you guys please stop writing letters to the editor? But again, there needs to be that relationship, because if you have a director that's afraid of the board, they probably aren't going to give real honest feedback. So again, making sure there's that good relationship so honest feedback can be given both ways.
So this Bold series is really designed for people who might be interested in board service. If you could give a message to anybody watching this about board service, what would it be?
I think board service is one of the greatest things that someone can do to give back to the community, to give back to an organization they care about. And I know initially when I was asked to serve on the board, my first thought was, because I have this image of boards, and some boards might be like this, but I had this image that people would meet around this big conference table and they'd all have fancy leather chairs like you're sitting in now.
It's leather.
Okay, well, the boardrooms have leather chairs. And, like I envisioned people in suits and people so much smarter than I am. And then my first board experience was normal people that cared about an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important as a board member, if you're going to commit to be all in, be invested enough to go to the meetings, read the emails, answer phone calls, to be accessible. I'm not saying that you have to be, at the director's beck and call, but to be professional and accessible. But it really is a great opportunity to learn more about your community, to help an organization. Everyone, at our board, we look for people with different skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
We require everyone on our board to have a passionate about our mission, to be passionate about our vision. And then if they have a skill they can bring too, that's awesome. So we try to find someone with legal skills and financial skills and PR and marketing and all of that. But the one thing that there has to be is that passion or commitment. And I think with that, everything else is possible. The reality is we have a really smart CPA that can explain the financial statements to everyone in both very technical terms and for the most simple of terms. There's a lot of people that can do a lot of the heavy lifting in that professional area. What we really need is strong, committed people that are dedicated to coming to meetings and participating.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I think we've learned a lot about advocacy, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. So,
thank you for asking.
all right.